You said you're a member of the inner circle and you never saw the decline. And after that, I wrote, how? Yep. You even write, Karine, that you were on the plane with him going to the debate and you didn't see anything.
All right, so you guys remember Karine Jean-Pierre, right? She was Biden's White House press secretary for a time. She is famous, or rather infamous, for lying a lot. She would kind of lie to the press directly and brazenly in a manner that almost makes me like her. I will say that. And she is on a press tour to promote her new book, which you can see in the background there, Independent. It is the story of why she's leaving the Democrat Party, how she left it, and why she's becoming independent. And so she's been making the rounds on morning shows and doing interviews. And interviewers are pressing her on the question of Biden's oatmeal brain. You know, they're saying, hey, when did you notice that his brain was turning into a mush of classic stovetop Quaker oats? And she's saying, I never noticed that. And so I want to watch a few clips today just so you can appreciate the loyalty, the stupidity, and just the brazenness of this woman.
The apparent decline of Joe Biden. You said you're a member of the inner circle and you never saw the decline. And after that, I wrote, how? Yep. You even write, Karine, that you were on the plane with him going to the debate and you didn't see anything.
Well, when we were on the Air Force One going to the debate, you got to remember his campaign people were on the team, his family was on the team. I actually was one of those rare trips that I didn't really see him until after the debate, even though I was on the plane. So really, I want everybody to know that I take this question incredibly seriously. I do. I was his White House press secretary, which means I had a role that saw him practically every day and traveled with him.
And you saw nothing.
For more than 95%. We've always said, we're not going to say, oh, he didn't age. He aged. And he poked fun at it. We always owned up. And with age comes what happens when you get older.
Which is?
But when we talk about the mental acuity, and again, I take this very, very seriously. I never saw anyone who wasn't there. I saw someone who was always engaged. I saw someone who understood policy, pushed us on the policy, and also understood history. And there were times, I'll tell you the story, there were times where he would call me into the...
Well, hold on, Karine Jean-Pierre. We know that Biden understood history because he was there for it. I mean, he probably remembers the Civil War. I'm sure he has recollections of the upheaval of the French Revolution as a young boy. So she's like simultaneously putting out her credentials of, oh, I spent so much time with Biden. I was so close to him. I was in his inner circle. And then she's also saying, yeah, but like when I was on the plane, I didn't actually see him. He was busy. He was talking with his family, with his friends. So she kind of wants to have it both ways. But let me say that I think that there are only two possibilities here, right? The first one is that Karine Jean-Pierre is lying, that she did notice the decline and she didn't say anything, and she is still maintaining that lie that she never noticed the decline, and that Biden was operating perfectly fine. He had the mind of a 22-year-old man. And the other possibility is that Karine Jean-Pierre is so dumb that she was actually awed by Biden's mental acuity, even as he slipped into like a geriatric fog, that even in that state, Karine Jean-Pierre looked at him and talked to him and said, man, that guy has got quite a mind. All right, let's continue with the clip.
Office, and I would be like, oh no, because I knew whatever he was going to ask me was going to be direct, was going to be about a story he read, about how we're pushing back, how we're pushing a message forward.
And you write about.
Okay, so that bit at the end, she says, when Biden would call me into his office, I was actually scared because he was going to quiz me. He was going to give me exam questions. I'm leaning towards the second explanation at this point. I had always thought that Karine Jean-Pierre was just covering up for Biden, and to be honest, I do still sort of think that. But I think it's funnier to assume that Karine Jean-Pierre truly viewed Biden as a mental giant. And I also want to put out the possibility that when when Biden was calling Karine Jean-Pierre into his office and asking her these things, she may have interpreted them as sort of like riddles from a sphinx, right? Because Biden would talk in these run-on sentences that never seemed to really go anywhere, and the past and the future and the present were all sort of jumbled, and he would recall these memories with pawpaw and ice cream and all these other ongoing themes. And Karine Jean-Pierre thought, wow, I have to work out these mental sort of Rubik's cubes that the president himself is giving me. So that's going to be my preferred explanation from now on, because I think it's funny. But there are more clips. As I said, Karine Jean-Pierre has been making the rounds. So she talked with Tim Miller of The Bulwark, and he also pressed her on the question of Biden's, mental state and how often he appeared before the press.
So that's number one. My job was to speak to what the decision he made in the sense of continuing, trying to lift up the policies and the legislative wins that we did have. We did have legislative wins.
Sure,
and
but he didn't talk about them that well, though. He couldn't talk about them. He wasn't campaigning.
No. Wait. First of all, he did talk about them. Whether it broke through or not, he did. Tim, he did talk about.
He talked way less to the press than Donald Trump does. Way less. And he wasn't out there at all. He wasn't good off the cuff. He wasn't doing press conferences. Let's just be real. Like, he didn't do paid events.
Tim, that's not true. Tim, you're conflating all of it. That's what you're doing. No, you're telling me he didn't talk well about it. Then you're telling me he didn't talk at all.
He didn't do either. He didn't talk very often, and when he did, it wasn't very good. He sounded very old.
Maybe you weren't paying attention to what we were doing at the White House. But
I paid attention. I'm with you on the policies. I'm talking about his performance.
The president spoke to the American people a couple times a week. He traveled and did domestic travel and talked directly to the American people. We are
Oh, I'm sorry. He was traveling, right? Because we've all been on a flight, and then we get off the flight and we immediately lose the ability to form coherent sentences. That is something that has happened to each and every one of us. We've all, been boarding a flight and tripped up the stairs to get onto the flight. That is a universal human experience. I'm sorry, Karine Jean-Pierre. Totally unfair question. I love Tim Miller's faces in this clip, the shades of emotion that are passing by, of just utter disbelief that she is still maintaining this line. But I will say that there is something I find sort of admirable about Karine Jean-Pierre's loyalty. It's totally stupid, because we can all see that Biden's brain was a bowl of melted ice cream. But in terms of just in terms of politics, it's sort of heartwarming that Biden still has someone on his team, someone who is willing to defend his presidency when everybody else, it seems, has jumped ship. Kamala Harris really hammered Biden in her book, and also hammered the White House comms team for not defending her. She kind of suggested that they would let negative stories about her run, that they wouldn't push back on assertions that she was failing at the border, and that she had been saddled with the impossible task of securing the border, which of course Trump did in no time flat, before even a year of his presidency had run. But okay, let's continue.
Talking about a time politically that is incredibly partisan. It is hard to break through any messaging. And it was an incumbency as well.
Yeah, because we know that the legacy press is just filled with right-wingers, right? Like the legacy press would never let a positive story about Joe Biden run. They would never try to cover up his mental slips and his blunders. No, Karine Jean-Pierre, you had basically all the institutional power on your side, and you still failed because you were not very good at your job. You can compare Karine Jean-Pierre with someone like Jen Psaki, who I am not particularly fond of, but certainly did a better job as a White House press secretary. She was able to skirt questions that she didn't like in a more deft way than Karine Jean-Pierre, who, by the way, looks rather different than how I remember her. I don't know what's going on. I guess she has a new haircut. Anyway, she's also just like very close to the camera, so that's probably part of it. But I don't really know where Karine Jean-Pierre goes from here, because she doesn't have, she's kind of burned all her bridges with Democrats now. As soon as she announced she was, boldly and bravely going independent, a slew of people who had worked with her came out to say, anonymously, Karine Jean-Pierre was dumb and incompetent, and we didn't like her, and it was difficult to work with her. And I don't know how many allies she's gonna find in the independent aisle. I really don't know where she goes from here, except maybe an invite to the Biden family Thanksgiving or something. And maybe that's what she's angling for. And if that's where she ends up, I'm happy for her. Really. As long as she does not occupy a prominent station in public life, or private life for that matter. Like, I don't want her to be some high-level bureaucrat. I think that would be kind of disastrous for everyone who is being managed by her. But as long as that doesn't happen, I think I'm okay with the Karine Jean-Pierre saga ending with a whimper. But let me know what you think of Karine Jean-Pierre in the comments below. Let me know what you think of her book, if you've read it for some reason. Give this video a like, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.